They thought she was just a nobody. They were wrong. I remember the sound, first crystal shattering on marble and then the silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against my skin like cold water. That was the moment everything changed. Not because of the wine I'd spilled. Not even because of the slap that followed. It was what came after. My name is Claire Bennett. If you saw me at the grocery store, you probably wouldn't remember me. And honestly, that's always been fine with me. I'm the kind of woman who keeps her head down. No flashy outfits, no Instagram perfect life. I work at the Maple Grove Public Library, and I love it. To most people, that makes me forgettable. To my family, it makes me a disappointment. My cousins? Real estate agents, surgeons, corporate lawyers. My parents died young, so I was raised by my Aunt Lorraine, who always made sure I knew I wasn't quite enough. Not smart enough, not ambitious enough, not beautiful enough. Just Claire, the family footnote. So when my cousin Vanessa sent me a handwritten invitation to her wedding, the first contact I'd had from her in 2 years, I almost tossed it. But something about the gesture, the cursive that looked like it had been traced a dozen times before being sent, made me pause. A part of me, the soft part I usually keep buried, still wanted to believe I belonged. I chose a simple navy dress, nothing too flashy. I clipped on my grandmother's pearls, the only heirloom I owned, and arrived 15 minutes early. The wedding was held at the Blake Estate, one of those sprawling venues with swans in the pond, and staff dressed better than most of the guests. Everyone shimmered in designer gowns and tuxedos like they belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. I felt like the punctuation mark at the end of someone else's sentence. Still, I smiled. I waved. I played the part. That was my mistake. No one greeted me. No one offered me a seat. When I asked a passing usher where to sit, he checked the guest list, raised an eyebrow, and directed me to a table at the far end next to the emergency exit. No centerpiece, no name cards, just a folded napkin and a plastic cup of water. Message received. I sat in silence while laughter echoed from across the garden. Vanessa looked stunning in her dress lace, custom cut, a designer name I couldn't pronounce. I watched her twirl under the fairy lights, radiant and untouchable. She was the center of attention, and I was the person everyone hoped wouldn't speak too loudly. Halfway through dinner, I stood to help a waiter carry empty glasses. It wasn't out of place for me. Helping is what I do, what I've always done. That's when it happened. My elbow clipped the edge of a wine flutone of those long-stemmed, top-heavy ones. Red wine arched through the air like a bloody comet and landed squarely on the front of Vanessa's gown, right across the bodice. Time stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. The quartet kept playing like they hadn't noticed, but everyone else had. Vanessa froze, hands hovering in mid-air, looking down at the spreading stain as if it were acid eating through her perfect life. "You idiot!" She hissed it before the scream came. "You absolute idiot! Do you have any idea what you've done? This dress cost more than your entire life." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "It was." Before I could finish, she slapped me. Right there, in front of her new in-laws, in front of her friends, in front of everyone who already believed I didn't belong. The sound echoed. My cheek burned. I felt blood in my mouth from where my teeth caught the inside of my lip. But worse than the pain was the silence. No one said anything. No one came to my defense. I stood there, wine-stained and trembling, while camera phones quietly started recording. The girl who didn't belong had finally made her mistake. I looked at Vanessa through stinging eyes. Her face was twisted in performative rage, but behind it, I saw something Elsie's satisfaction. This wasn't just about the dress. She'd been waiting for a moment to remind everyone who mattered, and who didn't. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, confident, slow, familiar. My heart stopped. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in Switzerland on business. I hadn't even told him which venue the wedding was at. He was never part of this world, my old world. And yet, there he was. Jackson Reed. He stepped into the garden with the quiet, dangerous grace of a man used to being watched. His charcoal suit caught the light like armor, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the crowd. And when they landed on my flushed, tear-streaked face, something behind them shifted, hardened. Vanessa kept ranting, oblivious. "This is my wedding day, Claire. You've ruined it. You can't even—" Then she stopped. Because Jackson was moving toward me. And the whole world was about to find out exactly who I really was. Jackson didn't rush. He never did. Every step he took across the polished garden tiles seemed choreographed, measured, intentional. Conversations trailed off. The clink of cutlery slowed, then stopped. Even the quartet faltered, unsure whether they should continue playing as the atmosphere shifted like a sudden drop in barometric pressure. All eyes turned to him. Some guests squinted, confused, wondering who the imposing man was in the $1,000 suit. Others already recognized him, their faces twisting into disbelief. I could hear a whisper starting from one table and rippling outward. "Is that Jackson Reed? The Jackson Reed?" My pulse thundered in my ears. This wasn't how he was supposed to find out. I'd protected him and us from my family for 3 years, not out of shame, but because I needed a space in my life that wasn't judged, dissected, or measured in dollar signs. Now that space had exploded. Jackson reached me and didn't say a word. Instead, he did something so simple, so devastatingly clear it knocked the breath from the room. He took my hand. Not roughly, not dramatically, just gently, as if we were alone. His thumb brushed over the base of mine, grounding me like he always did when I was close to breaking. My hand was trembling. His wasn't. Vanessa's voice cut in again, her tone sharper now, but tinged with something else: uncertainty. "Excuse me, sir. I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private family affair. I'd appreciate it if you didn't interfere." Jackson looked at her then, really looked, and I swear the air turned colder. "I'm very aware of what this is," he said, voice even, quiet, but with that undercurrent that made Wall Street executives lose sleep. "And you just made a very public mistake." Vanessa blinked, faltered. What are you talking about?" He tilted his head, just slightly. "You hit my wife." The word cracked through the garden like a gunshot. Gasps. Actual gasps. A woman across the patio dropped her champagne flute. One of the groomsmen, probably from the groom's side, swore softly under his breath. Vanessa's face went pale. "Wife?" My Aunt Lorraine, who'd been standing in the back, clutched her pearls like a soap opera extra. "Claire? Married?" Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. A few swipes later, he held up the screen to Vanessa, our wedding photo. A candid shot from the small civil ceremony in a simple white dress, laughing as he kissed my cheek. "Claire Bennett Reed," he said, "my wife of 3 years." The groom Vanessa's brand new husband leaned over and looked at the screen, his face drained of all color. Oh my God," he muttered. "That's Jackson Reed. Vanessa, do you even know who this is?" She stared at him like he was speaking Greek, so he turned his phone toward her. The screen displayed a Forbes cover, Tech Titans Under 40, Jackson Reed, the quiet billionaire. The subheading read, Net worth, $4.1 billion. The world shifted again. I watched as the guests, all of them, recalibrated their expressions. The pity in their eyes vanished, replaced by awe, embarrassment, calculation. I could almost see the gears turning behind my aunt's narrowed eyes. The same woman who'd once told me, "Girls like you marry guys who pump gas, not build empires," now looked like she was ready to faint. "And Vanessa?" She stammered. "Thursday. This is a joke. Claire doesn't even own a car that starts properly. She works in a library. She lives in that Itroach motel near 4th and Pine." Jackson's eyes didn't even flinch. She chose that life. I didn't force her. I offered her everything. She said she wanted to earn her peace. I respected that. The way he said it with pride, not apology, made something inside me unravel. I'd spent years thinking silence was strength, that disappearing was the cost of dignity. But as I stood there, wine-stained and trembling, with the most powerful man I'd ever known defending me in front of people who had spent their entire lives tearing me down, I realized I'd been wrong. Silence isn't always strength. Sometimes, real strength is letting the truth speak. Vanessa's face shifted into a pleading smile. "Claire, why didn't you tell us? I mean, we're family." Family. That word, out of her mouth, felt like an insult. I was about to answer, finally, truly answer, when Jackson raised his voice just enough to carry. "You hit her, not just tonight, for years." Nobody moved. "You hit her with your words, with your silence, with every moment you made her feel small, because she didn't play by your shallow rules. You treated her like background noise." Vanessa opened her mouth but couldn't speak. Jackson continued, his voice lowering into something more intimate, more lethal. I've sat in boardrooms with men who thought they could bully their way to dominance. You know what they all had in common? He paused. Let it sink in. They underestimated the quietest person in the room. No one spoke. Not even Vanessa. It was the first time I'd ever seen her speechless. The silence wrapped around the garden like a noose. Guests shifted awkwardly in their seats. The string quartet quietly stopped playing. The only sound was the rustle of expensive fabric as people leaned in to hear every word coming from Jackson Reed's mouth. My mouth was dry, my pulse still racing, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being seen, not because of the cameras still pointed at me, not because of my cousin's wedding imploding, but because he saw me, Jackson, and he was standing here at my worst moment making, sure no one could look away from the truth. I didn't come here to make a scene, Jackson said, glancing around the crowd. I came here to surprise my wife. I flew in early from Geneva. I thought I'd show up, steal her away for dinner, maybe buy her that ridiculous plant stand she keeps saying she doesn't need. A few people chuckled nervously, unsure whether laughter was allowed. But instead, he continued, his voice cold again, I walked into this. He gestured to Mimi ruined dress, my trembling hands, the red mark still faintly visible on my cheek. You don't have to like Claire, you don't even have to understand her, but what none of you get to do is pretend you didn't just witness what happened here tonight. He turned back to Vanessa. You slapped my wife, you humiliated her, and not just today. This slap, he pointed to my cheek, it's just the visible one. Vanessa's lips parted like she wanted to protest, but Jackson raised a hand, silencing her without effort. Let me tell you something about this woman, he said, and this time his tone softened just slightly. 3 years ago, I walked into a dusty library branch in the bad part of town. It was 10 minutes to closing. I was jet-lagged, irritated, looking for historical maps. She was the only person still there. He looked at me then, really looked, and I felt tears threatening again, but not from shame this time. She offered me tea in a chipped mug, told me about the original architect who built this city, didn't know who I was, didn't care. We talked until the janitor turned off the lights. It was the best conversation I'd had in 5 years. Gasps were replaced by stillness. People were listening now, not out of curiosity, but reverence. I asked her out. She said no, said I looked tired and needed to sleep, so I came back the next day, and the day after that. The confession landed like poetry, in a place that had only known performance. She didn't fall for my name. She didn't care about my money. She asked questions no one else had ever dared to ask. She made me explain myself. She challenged me. And when I proposed 6 months later in the parking lot behind a diner, she didn't say yes until I agreed to her one condition. He turned back to the crowd. She made me promise she could keep her life, her job, her apartment, her books. I had to earn her without using my name. People stared at me now, not with pity, but with something dangerously close to respect. Vanessa looked nauseous. She could have had everything handed to her, Jackson said, but she wanted to earn it, on her own. And you all dismissed her, mocked her. You saw the simplicity and assumed it meant weakness. He stepped closer to her, voice low and final. You just slapped the strongest person in this entire garden. Vanessa's jaw quivered. Jackson, I didn't know. If I had known. That's the problem, he interrupted. You only treat people with dignity when you know they're powerful. What does that say about you? No one came to her defense, not even her new husband, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Then Jackson turned back to me. Claire, he said gently, like the chaos behind him didn't exist. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. I could barely breathe, but I nodded. You're here now. He smiled faintly, and that was all it took to steady me. And then something shifted. Not in him, in me. I stepped forward, brushing his hand gently, then turned to face the crowd, not hiding behind him, not shrinking back. My voice didn't shake. For years, I thought keeping my life small was the only way to protect what mattered to me, I said. But the truth is, I wasn't protecting it. I was hiding. From you. From all of you. Vanessa looked away. I thought if I just stayed quiet, you'd forget to hate me. If I kept my head down, you'd stop reminding me I wasn't enough. But all I did was give you permission to keep diminishing me. My voice grew stronger. So let me be clear now. I'm not the same woman you used to dismiss at family brunch. I'm not the one you whispered about, and I'm not your scapegoat anymore." No one moved. "I don't need your approval. I never did, because I already have the respect of the one person whose opinion actually matters." Jackson squeezed my hand. I looked at Vanessa. "You wanted your wedding day to be unforgettable. Well, it is now." And with that, I turned toward the exit, head held high, heart steady, and walked away from the only version of myself they'd ever allowed me to be. We didn't say anything as we left the garden. Jackson's hand never let go of mine. The sound of our footsteps across the flagstones felt louder than the applause Vanessa had received earlier. Not because the crowd was cheering, but because now no one dared to speak. The bride, the groom, the guests in their designer suits, they just watched us walk away. And that, somehow, was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. In the parking lot, as fairy lights faded behind us, Jackson finally turned to me. The anger in his eyes was gone, no, replaced by something softer, sadder. "You okay?" he asked. I paused, thought about it. "I'm tired," I admitted, "but I'm done hiding." He pulled me close, pressed his forehead against mine. "They don't deserve you." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I actually meant it. We drove back to our home, not the penthouse downtown, not the vineyard in Napa. Just the small craftsman house we'd picked out together last year, nestled under oak trees, with a mailbox Jackson insisted on repainting himself. Our safe place. As I changed out of the wine-stained dress, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The red mark on my cheek had already started to fade, but it was still there, faint but visible, like a scar. Or maybe a reminder. I didn't feel humiliated anymore. I felt powerful. Not because of the billions in Jackson's bank account. Not because a crowd had finally recognized my worth. But because I had spoken. Because I had walked away from people who only respected titles, not truth. The next day, a video of the incident went viral. Someone had recorded the slap, but more importantly, someone else had recorded Jackson's speech, my quiet stand, the moment the wedding turned upside down. The headlines were sensational. Billionaire reveals librarian wife at cousin's wedding, leaves guests stunned. Bride slaps guest, then learns she slapped a billionaire's wife. She was the family disappointment, until she wasn't. I didn't ask for any of it. I didn't want the attention. But something about the footage, about us, touched a nerve. People started writing to the library. Donations came in. Messages from strangers, from other Claires, who said they'd been made to feel small their whole lives. Who said they'd cried when I finally spoke? Who said they'd never felt so seen? Vanessa never apologized, not really. She sent a single text. "I didn't know. You could have told me." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "You shouldn't have had to know." She left me on red. That was the last I heard from her. But I didn't need closure from her, or from any of them. Because something bigger had closed inside me, that quiet, aching need to be accepted by people who never truly saw me. It was gone. 2 weeks later, Jackson and I sat under our backyard string lights, sipping tea like we always did. He leaned back, watched me for a long time, then smiled. "You know, I used to think strength was about winning, conquering, owning. And now? Now I know," he said. "It's knowing exactly who you are and not shrinking for anyone." I laughed softly. "Took you long enough." We clinked our mugs. That night, I wrote something in my journal, just one sentence. Greatness doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes, it wears pearls and a wine stain and walks out quietly while the world tries to catch up. Never underestimate the woman who stays silent. Because sometimes, the ones who've been quiet the longest are the ones with the loudest truth to tell. You don't have to raise your voice to reclaim your dignity. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is to live so fully and truthfully that those who doubted you are left speechless.